Often when parents and children are interacting, the parents are just, it feels like they're on top of the children. I'm using that as a metaphor to making sure the children are doing what they're supposed to be doing and completing the homework they're supposed to be completing and blah, 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 and the chores. Just time built into each week, hopefully a little bit in each day, just to get to know your child when they come home from school or you see them or during meals.
Kelly, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Kelly is one of my friends, and she's my colleague from the Positive Discipline Association. Kelly, I'll let you talk about your journey through positive discipline and a bit about yourself.
All right. I became a mom about 30 years ago. My oldest child is 30. My younger child is 27. And he was about 18 months old when my mother-in-law came to visit us from out of town, and she saw I was trying to use some methods other than traditional parenting methods to face challenges that I was having with my son, I said he was 18 months at the time. And she very gently said, "Oh, you might be interested in this book called Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson." And when I said my mother-in-law suggested something, some people might think it was something very negative that happened, but she just did it so gracefully and just one sentence. And I went to the library, got the book, and I read it and thought, and the book was Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson. I thought, why didn't anyone ever tell me this before? I've never heard of these ideas, and they're just lovely and so helpful. And it was a new way of thinking. So I eventually read the book 3 times cover to cover so that I could really absorb these new ideas that I was learning about. And then that was way back when there was something called America Online, and there was a section of that called Moms Online. I joined that and started, I found this positive discipline discussion group, started discussing positive discipline with other moms. Jane Nelson dropped in there, and she encouraged me to eventually become a positive discipline educator. And I wanted to go to a positive discipline class, but there were no classes in my area. So that's what I eventually did. I became a positive discipline educator and started teaching parent workshops myself. And that was, a long time ago. It was in 1999 that I attended Teaching Parenting the Positive Discipline Way, the workshop that started me teaching parents.
Wow. So what you just shared, especially about your mother-in-law, how often do we think when something that's shared with us through our mother-in-law, right away our brain goes to one way or the other, right? And it's so encouraging that when we have the best interests and some of these little tips brings us to a direction that can be so encouraging, empowering. So when you were thinking about positive discipline at that time, what were the traditional methods and how is positive discipline different? Or what is it that you liked about positive discipline?
Well, I have this memory of my dad chasing me around the room in the house when I was at least 4 or younger, and he was trying to spank me. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. Surely there's another way. And I was raised in a lovely family, and actually my mom put a stop to the spanking soon after that. So I did not receive many spankings. But even when I was little, I said, I want to find a different way. I remember that moment distinctly. And so when I had a son, I thought, well, I don't think spanking makes sense to me. So what else is there? And positive discipline offered so many other ways to teach my son. So one thing I learned in the book was discipline it comes from the Latin word disciplis, which means to teach. And I had this traditional view of discipline that it meant punishment to stop behaviors. So I learned this whole new way of thinking and this whole new way of teaching my child what to do instead of focusing on what he shouldn't do, focus on teaching him some new skills or setting limits in a way that is respectful and keeps his dignity intact.
Absolutely. It's quite interesting that even as a 3-year-old, you were so creative. You were thinking outside of the box and problems like, what are some other ways that this could be done? I don't want to be spanked. And I know traditionally speaking, either spanking or threats, right? You better do it now or I am going to take something away from you. It's how I was raised as well. It's like, if you don't do this, then, you're not going to get this. Or and my parents, as your parents, were just amazing folks, wanted to do really well and just wanted to raise us with some life skills and qualities that we can become healthy adults with. So why is creativity still important? And especially in early childhood, why is it so important? And how does positive discipline play a role in fostering creativity for children?
Oh, one of my favorite things besides positive discipline is teaching parents about healthy child development and specifically social and emotional development. Mm. So many of the people out there may know about Erikson's stages. So if you don't, go look that up. If you do, you'll know what I'm talking about. But as children are developing, they're first totally dependent on us, but the next stage of development is having a sense of autonomy and knowing that you're your own person, this little person, even who's 2 years old, and that you have your own ideas that may be very different from another person's ideas. And part of creativity, or part of problem solving, is creativity, because there is never just one way to solve a problem. And what I love about positive discipline is it gives both parents new ways to solve problems, and it actually says to parents, hey, what if you involve the child in solving this problem? And you say to even a 4-year-old, wow, there's a spill on the floor. What can we do about it? And so positive discipline, that one big aspect of positive discipline is about problem solving and focusing on solutions, brings out a lot of good creativity that is about solving real life problems when they happen. So I love the other part of creativity that is about art and music and dance as well, so that children learn to express themselves in different ways, get to know themselves, their feelings, and how to express that. So I love all that side, but just talking about positive discipline, it's just such a great tool, or there are great tools to have children problem solve and think of outside of the box ways, because there are so many ways to solve every problem. But often as parents, we go to the traditional way, or just the first thought that we think of. And when I'm teaching parenting classes, I encourage parents to, okay, let's get 8 good ideas up here. And those are usually real ideas that most everybody in the group can think about. And now let's keep going. Can we get 15 ideas? Can we get 20 ideas? And so I love to bring that out with parents, and then hopefully they will also bring that out with their children.
Yes. And it sounds like communication too. You're really good at drawing forth a lot of different ideas, because there are many ideas that we have that we don't go to. Well, we go to the ones that our parents have modeled for us, or our community members have modeled for us, or what we watched on social media or elsewhere. And then sometimes we have that disconnect from what we really, if we took time to consider their other encouraging ideas that you're talking about. So what are some of the example of activities that you did with your son and your daughter that brought the sense of empowerment?
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you mean activities that I planned for them, or just in the moment how we solved problems?
Yeah, just some examples, because I think when we're talking about traditional and positive discipline, it can be really confusing. So just a little bit of a concrete examples of what creative activities look like, and how do you solve problems if, for example, my child will not wear certain clothes or won't eat certain food. So how do we bring creativity in this to solve the problems, versus saying, you better eat or you're going to bed hungry, or you better put this clothes on, or, we're going to be late, and we get to the punishments and threats.
Okay. So I remember when my daughter was either 2 or 3. It snowed outside at our house. I live in South Carolina, so it does not snow very often, but it snowed. And I encouraged the children, let's go out and investigate this snow. And my daughter, I said, get your shoes on, get some coats on. So she went to she had no socks or shoes on, and she went and got some sandals that were the easiest ones to put on. So she has sandals on with her toes open, and we're going out to play in the snow. And I my go-to tool, just starting it, I don't always, sometimes I think and I don't act. I think and I go, okay, what else can I think of next? Was to say, well, your feet are going to be cold. You'll need warmer shoes. You'll need socks and your warmest shoes on. But I said, oh, those are the shoes you want to wear. Okay. And we were just going out in the front yard. So I thought, if she gets cold, she can come back in and get some different shoes on. Why don't I let her learn from this experience? And I can't remember exactly if I said any questions to her, but we went outside, and I can't even remember if she ever changed shoes. I think she did, but that was an example of she's not going to freeze to death. She could just go walk back in the house and get some warm clothes on. And I decided I didn't even have to ask her, are your feet cold? Are your feet cold yet? Like that would have maybe set up a power struggle, or not let her learn from just the natural consequences of wearing sandals in the snow. I might have set up something where she had something else to prove instead, just to let her learn from that. And then my second example is about eating food. So dinner time never was that big of a struggle at our house. Number one, each kid had to help me cook dinner, just a portion of the dinner, once a week. Well, we had a rotating wheel, so sometimes it was twice a week. But even as 3-year-olds, I had them do simple tasks to help me cook, things that were safe and things that I was supervising right there. So when the children had more investment in preparing the meal, they were more likely to eat it and try new foods. And secondly, I had a guideline that was, if you don't want to eat what we're eating here at our meal, you can make yourself a sandwich. We always had peanut butter and things to go on bread to make a sandwich, or you can open a can of Campbell's soup or some kind of soup. And those are the two things. So I think they were probably maybe 6 or 7 or 8 when I said you can make soup on the stove. But I had those two things, and I think there was only once or twice that they chose to do that. But that there was no forcing. And I always tried to make sure that there were two things on the table that I knew they had eaten before and would eat. I mean, I didn't worry about that too much, but in general, that was in the back of my mind.
Ellie, this is very, very helpful, because when we're working with population parents and caregivers from around the world, we have different beliefs around the world. When I grew up, if you weren't wearing proper clothing and you went out right away, they believe that you're going to catch a cold and you're going to get sick. Because obviously you're assuming that your body's going to be working hard to keep warm, and hence your immune system will be low. And what you just explained about, hey, putting the shoes on, we're just going to go outside. We're not going to be out there until the toes go purple, but we're going to just try it out for this young person to see, I feel cold and I have to do something. And had you just gone and said, put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on. Now that is a pattern that now you're inheriting, because that is what they're going to wait for, and for someone to remind them. When that comes from yourself, chances are problem-solving skills are developing. And that's such a hard part for parents often, is to kind of persevere and teach that lesson. But it seems so much long-term to teach those lessons, so that you're not chasing the child around the house to feed them, but there are guidelines, there are agreements that you've made in advance. This is what we do in our home. This is what we're going to cook. And so I appreciate those. And now, if you could also share some communication tools with us, like what types of tools would be helpful for parents how do they even go from having constantly told their children, get your homework, do this, put your shoes on? How do they shift? Because it's really, really challenging to move from where we are to a new pattern. So, how did you make that shift?
That's one of my favorite things about positive discipline. I think number one was using routines or creating routines, bedtime routines, mealtime routines, so that there's just an order of doing things that children are experiencing over and over and over again. This is what we do. And with the eating routine, I mentioned earlier that we had jobs. So we had four dinner jobs. We called them supper jobs in the South. And they were fix the drinks, help cook, put the condiments on the table, or set the table with placemat. With sometimes placemats, but not always, plates and the eating utensils. So there were four jobs. We had four family members. So those jobs rotated each night. And there was a picture chart of those four jobs, and we just turned one wheel. It was two paper plates stuck together, but it was just something we did every day. And then, of course, there were times when my children said, "I don't want to help cook. I want to keep playing right now," or "I don't want to sit at the table. I'm playing with my friends." And so, one of the positive discipline tools I use is curiosity questions, and they usually start with the words what or how. There's other words you can use, but those are two easy words to start. Well, what will we do if the table doesn't get set? How will we eat if we don't have the eating utensils? Another one is encouragement. Validation and encouragement. Yeah, you're playing with your friends. I understand how fun that is. And then I really need your help with this. It will only take a minute. Are you willing to stop playing for just a minute, set the table, and then you can go back in until dinner time? So communication tools, I would say, are validation and encouragement, and then the curiosity questions that often start with what or how. And then routines, to me, it's kind of like if we create those routines first, then you could use those communication tools to go back and ask about the routine, because it would be something that's very familiar to the children.
So it sounds like very doable when you have young children starting with the routines because of the age appropriateness. Perhaps that's going to help them know this is what we do, then this happens. But when they're older, it also invites them to know that, hey, this is what's done. And when it's not done, the parent could say, what you just said really resonated with me. What is your plan on getting your homework done? Or how would you like to set this up? And that just gives so much ownership to the teens, adult children, or even younger children to have that personal power. And I believe that I would be more cooperative if someone would say, hey, would you like to help me chop some vegetables? Sometimes I might stomp my feet and say, no, I want to much rather be doing this or play with my friends. But more often than not, the connection time that you're speaking about is so valuable, because our children are so otherwise busy, but just this is a great little tease to say, we're going to spend quality time together. We're just going to have conversation. We're going to chop, and that bond that grows, that just lasts forever. And I know you're very, very creative, and I love all the creativity you use. How can we turn chores into enjoyable experiences for children all ages?
Well, the first thought is to bring that connection into it that you mentioned. So when my children were helping cook, and most of their tasks took 3, 4, or 5 minutes to do when they were preschoolers, and as they got older, the part of the dinner prep that I asked them to do became longer till it was they were spending a little bit more time with me and having more responsibility at the dinner. But it is making that a pleasant experience and not saying, oh, you're not chopping that right. Oh, I need that in smaller pieces. We have to, make that a positive experience. And there's another tool called Take Time for Training. So if I know that I want that chopped a specific way, then I need to take the time and teach that before they ever start chopping. And that happens over time. Like, they helped me cook once or twice a week their entire lives. And so we had all that connection, all that teaching time. And then another thing, I think one of the big struggles for me and for most parents is having the child clean their room, clean up their toys. I came up with some creative ideas for that. And so young children don't know what a clean room or clean your room really means. So on the back of their doors, we made this routine chart of how to clean your room. Make your bed first, and then clean up things on the floor next. So very specific. And when they're preschoolers, we had pictures that coordinated with these tasks. But clean your room is so overwhelming. And you can see children sometimes just look like, this is too much. I can't do it. So to break those tasks down into smaller tasks is helpful. And then sometimes the floor would just be full of toys. And I had hula hoops that I used for all kinds of activities. But one day I said, here, put this hula hoop, it's a round hula hoop, in one section of the floor and just clean up what's inside the hula hoop. What's in the circle? You could do the same thing with a piece of yarn or ribbon or something, so that you're dividing that big task into a smaller task. And my child could choose where to put the hula hoops. There were some choices. And then, okay, now move it to another section and work on that section. So there's just lots of ways to make it fun, songs and music and working together and having them limited choices. Okay, I'll actually help you clean because this looks like a big task. Do you want me to clean up the dolls and you clean up the blocks, or vice versa? There's just so many different ways to teach skills, make it fun, and not put fear into the situation, which is what traditional parenting usually does. Fear breaks the connection. It breaks the fun element. It makes it seem like cleaning is this horrible thing you must do in life. Well, what if you can make it fun? A little Mary Poppins on just a little bit. All of life can't be like that, but when you're a child, it sure helps.
Sure does. Thinking you're bringing up so many memories for me as well, and so creative to say, just use what you have. It could be a hula hoop, which is a little round tube you put around your waist and you kind of spin it. Or you could just use a yarn or a thread or just this tile block, just moving it from one to another. So taking that focus away from the task at hand to making it really fun. And how creative is that? It brings up for me when I was a very young child, I always wanted to help. I really wanted to be around the adults. And they would give me tasks like taking the green beans, the ends off, or taking the veins out, or chopping those, or creating little tortillas, just very small ones until you kind of grow and grow and you can make that whole one. That excitement that you feel like, wow, I did this. In the beginning, when I made my tortillas, they might have looked like a map of different continents. And then when you start to keep working on it, and then it becomes round and larger and thinner and perfect, that perfection that each child always strives for. And what you said is allowing it to be where it is versus correcting. It's saying, do it this way or that way. Children already are critical of themselves and want to do better. So Kelly, when children are putting their best foot forward, they're really trying. And sometimes as parents, we're looking at them and saying, you're not doing it the way I want. I'm going to tell you what to do, how to do. What can parents do to remain encouraging and empowering of children?
Well, number one would be not to say some of the things that we're thinking, because when we teach our children to make their beds at first, they don't make it the way that we would make it. There are not clean lines. There are the sheet is hanging below the comforter or the cover. And so just to keep our mouths shut with some of the things we're thinking is a way of encouraging our children. And then also keeping that take time for training a tool in mind that they will get to try something again and again and again. And I encourage parents to think back to skills that we developed. We probably didn't have the skill exactly the first time we tried it. It's repetition that helps us. And Also, to remember that I think Jane Nelson said, children don't have the same exact values that we have. So, to remember that, we've asked a child to make the bed because we like the way it looks and functions, but children may not have that value. And so, they're going to approach the project and the task from a completely different place. And just as an adult, when I'm learning new skills, I think I get feedback from other people a little bit too much anyway. And I've noticed and told them, oh, I'm not ready for that feedback yet. I'm still working on this basic skill right now. And another thing I remember asking my children is that what and how question, or what do you think about that? Or how do you think it looks? Or what do you think would help tighten up that sheet, or whatever it is. So asking what and how questions again. Also, now I'm thinking about going back to take time for training, that we do it together first. So we might do a task together for a long time before I would ask the child to do the task himself or herself, so that there's lots of teaching opportunities and just modeling. I remember suggesting or telling some of my neighbors about that my children were helping cook. And that parent thought it was a great idea. And so they just told their child that they were supposed to cook one night. These are teenagers. It's your turn to cook one night. But there wasn't any time for training. And so the child had not had a lot of experience in the kitchen, cooked frozen pizza for dinner. I mean, to me, that's okay. If the child doesn't have much time for training and cook the pizza, that's fine. We have to think about that process. If we're going to hand a task over to the child, what do they need to be successful? And one of those things is doing it with someone first, having a lot of experience doing that before they can do it themselves, usually.
Wow. That makes such a great point for me to know that sometimes our expectations and what skills they have is one of the biggest things to look forward to. I'll be definitely mindful in that area as well. So far, if you like what you're hearing, please don't forget to push the follow button and like. You can reach my audio podcast and variety of blogs on my website, yogipateltte.com. And Kelly, how can folks reach you?
So I have two different work areas. So I have two different social media accounts. So I have my website is www.gointeractivetraining.com. So I do teach trainers. One of the things I teach trainers is positive discipline. I teach other trainers who train on any topic, active learning strategies. So that's why it's gointeractivetraining.com. And then on Instagram and Facebook, you can, if you want to know about parenting and positive discipline, that's Think It Through Parenting, are my accounts on Facebook and Instagram. And then Go Interactive Training is for people who are trainers, instructors, or teach adult learners anything. It's Go Interactive Training on Facebook and Instagram.
So now let's move into behaviors. I know myself, you, and many parents face a lot of challenging behaviors from their young ones, their teens, and almost adult children. So what advice do you have for parents when faced with challenging behaviors with their children?
Number one is just to stop and breathe and calm down, because I was teaching a workshop last week for people who are going to be parent educators. And several times it came up that the parent was catastrophizing, looking at that one incident and seeing it, pretending like it's going to blow up. My child's going to be in jail because they don't know how to do this skill, or because they're misbehaving in this way. Or, oh, my child is not answering their phone. Somebody has kidnapped them and they're gone forever now. And so lots of times we as parents do look at this behavior and we think of the worst case scenario. And so I encourage parents to have more just tinier thoughts, such as, oh, my child is struggling with something. What can we do about that? Or, oh, wow, my child really doesn't know how to do this skill. How can I focus on solutions and take time for training in the future? Just to normalize that our children are imperfect. They're humans just like we are. And just to stay calm about what they're doing. When your child's running in the street, that is one of those moments most everybody understands that in that moment, you're not going to be calm. Safety is your biggest issue. But then once you get your child safe, to calm down and think, okay, what can we do in the future? But often we blow things up that are just very small, trivial things. My child's not doing their homework. They're not even going to go to the next grade in school or something big like that instead of, oh, how can we focus on solutions for homework? So my first advice is to just accept what it is and not blow it up into something it isn't at the moment. And second is to take time for training, focus on solutions. If your child is misbehaving, often it's either a lack of skills, the child doesn't know how to be successful, or a lack of belief in themselves. It could be they're believing something that they don't know how to do it. Or so it could, we have these ideas in positive discipline that are Adlerian, come from Alfred Adler, Rudolf Dreikurs, about mistaken goals of behavior. So it could be that the child has this belief that is actually guiding that behavior. And so the idea is to be a little bit curious as a parent, be a misbehavior detective, and try and figure out what is the real underlying reason for the behavior first, and then move out of that. Especially those behaviors that are patterns that keep happening over and over and over again. Start observing, ask some questions to your child. What do you notice? And also the mistaken goal chart that was created by Rudolf Dreikurs has a column where we look and see what our feelings are when children are misbehaving, and that will give us some clues as well. Those things that happen a lot. First, do some detective work before you act. And then secondly, if a behavior only happens one time and never happens again, I just don't make a big deal out of it. It's those patterns that oh, God, obviously this child's struggling with something. This keeps happening over and over again. Let's dive under that and see if we can first figure out what's the cause and then move from there.
Now we're continuing to talk about these behaviors. And we talked about helping around the house or tasks, or so parents, when they're faced with challenges where children resist, often they don't want to complete a task or an activity. In positive discipline, how would we work with our children when those challenges happen? And I'm asking this because often we think we've heard this podcast or this video is watched, or we take a training and next day things will change. So what can parents do?
Well, get curious, like I said before, but when we're trying to teach tasks, I think it's helpful to get into the child's world. The child has very different priorities than we do. For example, teenagers are focused on their friends and being popular at school, and that is their priority, and individuating and understanding child development, first of all. So what's going on in their world. Secondly is to invite cooperation, and that can't be done unless there's a strong connection in the relationship. So it can be helpful for parents to validate, I know this isn't your priority. I get it that it's mine. How can we work together? Because I think this will be helpful for you in the long run. What can we do? One time my son said, Mom, I actually like it that I have to help cook and that I get to do things for myself, but I just don't have a lot of time right now. I've got a lot going on. That was true. We tried to figure out this was when he was the teenager. My son was the teenager. Tried to figure out when he could do this task that was a good time for him. So we were focusing on solutions after I got into his world to figure out what is the real barrier here for my child. And so patience. Oh, wow. Parents, often we think if my child doesn't learn this skill right now, they're doomed for life or something. So that urgency comes up. And one thing I learned is to have patience with the process. Secondly is breaking those tasks into smaller steps, smaller chunks, because it can get so overwhelming that we say to a child, clean your room, We'll go clean out your car if it's a teenager who has a car.
Kelly, what you're just basically saying is becoming a detective yourself as a parent on figuring out what is going on and why is it that the task is not getting done. Perhaps it's too daunting, or perhaps there is lack of time, or there's something else going on. And then sitting down and having those conversations. And when we don't have any guidelines and routines that are in place, and we go from traditional parenting to positive discipline or different approaches, it takes time. And it sounds from your conversation so much, it's important to have that connection and bond. So first understanding one another and slowly building. And that could be, hey, let's just talk about all the things that we're doing in the house and which areas do you want to help in? Or what's going on for you? How was your day today? And what went on for you? That curiosity of really understanding our children. And I like what you just shared, and I appreciated it for all the parents to know, is that being that good detective on looking at the positive, perhaps having good intention. My child, I trust you and I believe in you, and nothing terrible is going to happen. And the only person who has the answer is my child. So I'm going to ask you versus ask my emotional brain for possible cause and scenarios of what might have happened. These are very, very helpful tools, because I know many times I've tried different approaches of parenting, and they're short term because we either don't know how to implement it or where to start. And I believe this conversation with you is really helpful in parents to just even get started and then staying focused. So now the children are working, they're completing their task or they're achieving something. And we often get, either too critical or too excited. So let's talk about celebration and celebrating milestones. So when our children have achieved small or large milestones, how can parents celebrate that and still remain encouraging of their children?
Yes, because I think children notice when we're being too patronizing to them. We're being too overly praising. Good job, good job. Nobody wants to hear that all the time. I tried to talk to my children using encouragement and sometimes a little bit of praise in a way that I would talk to another adult. I tried to not act like I'm the adult and I am in charge of your confidence and your self-esteem. And so I need to tell you how you feel, not top down, not talking down to them, because sometimes we can talk down to people even when they did something really well. And we're trying to encourage them. It may sound like none of this would be ever said verbally, but the tone and the way it's said can sometimes imply, well, yeah, you didn't know what you're doing and now you do. Something like that. So I try to respect their self-esteem and talk to them like I would talk to another adult. And because often we do talk to children, and I understand why we have baby talk is actually very helpful for babies. There's a point at which the children are old enough to know, wait, that sounds like you didn't think I could do it before. So a lot of encouragement. We have a tool in positive discipline called encouragement, and it's more about acknowledging the child's effort and that mistakes are part of the learning process, and that we celebrate mistakes as they happen. Oh, wow, you learned something that didn't work. And then the celebrating the outcome can be, what do you want to do about it? Wow, you accomplished this big goal. How would you like to celebrate? I would ask them and not assume that they might like the way that I would want to celebrate.
Mistakes, celebrating mistakes. Now, many of us, when we make a mistake, our parents' role might think at least that their role is to keep their children from making the mistakes again. So it could also result in, how did you make a mistake? How are you going to fix it? What are you going to do about it? And you're talking about celebration. Tell me more.
Well, this is something I did not grow up with. It's not like my parents admonished me or really shamed me and blamed me for all my mistakes. They didn't do that a lot, but I just never had heard this idea that mistakes were okay. I was the first grandchild born in my family of a bunch of grandchildren. I was the oldest child. I just put this pressure on myself that I should not make mistakes and that I should learn something the first time. So that was a big, big learning point for me in positive discipline when I read the book. And then even after I read the book, it took me a very, very long time, years, in fact, for me to say the words, I made a mistake. I couldn't, my ego, my self-esteem couldn't handle that. And so because it was so hard for me to learn, I really wanted my children to not have to learn that in their 30s. So that was the biggest aha I had when I read Jane's book. Like, even to this day, I worry that I didn't teach my children that enough. I mean, it's done. And I think I was a good enough parent. It's a constant thing I have to remind myself of, that mistakes are part of the learning process. I still, I just pause sometimes and have to remind myself it's okay to make mistakes. But I think we all have this challenge in life that even when we're taught that from a young age, we humans just feel inadequate. We want to feel adequate, and we use those mistakes as evidence that we're not adequate. We're so easy to go there. And so that's why I wanted my children to explicitly hear the message, it's okay to make mistakes. Well, you learned something that didn't work. So I tried to very calmly and naturally make that part of my conversations with my children. It's not easy.
Not easy. It's not easy. And now that we are adults who also were children once and have mistakes and know what it feels like, and everyone hearing this conversation can relate to themselves making a mistake. And when you're a child, for example, 2 times 2, and they say 4, and 2 plus 2, 4, and then you continue to go on and you're being quizzed, and those lightning tests that they do where, you have to quickly answer the questions, and every child is wired differently. And perhaps a child that doesn't want to make a mistake because everyone has different beliefs. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to be smart, not smart, whatever, it might be punished. And based on that, and if they become emotional, chances are, instead of thinking, being able to critically think in that moment, because of that emotion, temporarily their brain is going to go into that confusion state and not really rationally think, though they might know the answer, but because now it's a speed test, it just freak out. And they might not do well in tests. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not good at math or they're not good at debate. They just need skill building that you were talking about. Let's practice. Let's work on it. And let's do it faster. And making fun, like you were saying, just creativity, just creating that hula hoop around it or a yarn around it, and breaking a task down to a way where it's fun and they get something wrong and say, what did you learn from this? You got something wrong on your paper and it has a red mark. How do you feel about it? What are you going to do about it differently next time? And I think children will feel more encouraged if we did that. But when we say, why did you get a B plus? It should be A. Instead of saying, you got a B plus, how do you feel about it? Chances are they're going to say, I really don't like B plus. Or they're going to say, you know what? That's the greatest thing today. And kind of keeping it where it is and encouraging them to, of course, learn. But which child really says, I just don't want to learn? Except when they feel discouraged and believe that they're not smart. So I appreciate this conversation about mistakes. And as adults, there's so much that we can do to support our children. And then we forget that we have the power, that magic wand of being that encouragement fairy or, person that really brings our child the confidence, or we can remove that confidence unknowingly. And this is really helpful.
That made me think of risk-taking. Often we think of risk-taking as a negative thing, but when our children become adults, they need to take risks at work. They need to put themselves out of their own comfort zone to learn new things. If we have been saying, stay in the box, make sure you don't make mistakes, or don't let anybody see your mistakes, then our children won't have a healthy sense of healthy risk taking, because in order to achieve in life and move forward, we often have to put ourselves out of our comfort zone, and we are going to make mistakes if we try something new. And so it's hard to think about that sometimes, that when they're children and we're trying to say, do it this way, this is how the teacher wants it. It's harder for us to value taking a risk, making mistakes, and think about, oh, what do I want for my child when they're an adult? Because when we're building those beliefs about mistakes for children, they carry that until their adulthood. And when they make a mistake at work and they try to hide it from their boss, it usually is not going to turn out so well.
Right. And they're probably going to hide a lot of their mistakes, right? And everything that we don't want, we receive sometimes when we have control or fear-based, right? So when we're fearful of, my child's not going to go to Harvard. Well, not everyone goes to Harvard. However, our goal is to create happy children and invite them to be their best. And looking at those strengths, chances are we're going to be able to invite the children to feel how capable they are. And when they also feel how capable they are, chances are, like you said, they might be able to take those risks that we want them to take because they're willing to mess up and learn from it. And they're not going to sit there saying, when I make a mistake, I am terrible, not smart. But they're going to say, yep, I made a mistake. Yeah, next time I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z different. So what a difference, and very small shift. But when we're taking our job as a CEO of this child, we can take it one way or the other. And the leadership qualities emerge at home. So Kelly, it sounds like you have had this amazing journey raising your two children, because at 18 months of age of your child, you came into connection with positive discipline and met the founder at one of the parenting sessions that you were doing. How could folks find such workshops?
I do want to add something before I answer this question. Even though I learned about positive discipline, I started learning about it when my son was 18 months old. I was not a perfect parent, and I have never been a perfect parent. So I've had a lot of good parenting moments, and I've made a lot of mistakes as a parent. But in positive discipline, I learned the R's of recovery from mistakes, so I could go back and make it a learning opportunity for my children. So I do want to be clear that just because I was practicing positive discipline did not mean that I did everything perfectly. So that was not the case, and my children can tell you. But most of the time I did go back and make up for my mistakes in some way or another. I did rupture and repair. I'm thinking of Gottman, who talks about that. So if I made a mistake, I went back and made a repair, usually with my children. Yogi and I both offer workshops, and the Positive Discipline website. There's positivediscipline.com and positivediscipline.org. Either one of those websites will have a place where you can click on classes for parents to take. And also, if you're interested in teaching positive discipline, we have certification workshops for that too, for people to become a positive discipline parent educator or a positive discipline early childhood educator. We have several different paths. There's even positive discipline in the classroom for teachers. I love teaching the workshops to parents, as well as workshops to certify people to teach positive discipline.
Yes, absolutely. We have workshop for that. We have even empowering people in the workplace, keeping joy in marriage. Positive discipline is in over 88 countries. But my initial role here is to support parents who are like me and you, Kelly, who experienced challenges of raising a child, and hopefully some of the tools that we've shared would be helpful. And you are so right. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. It's a journey. And on that journey, we can choose to do things in the moment that could be helpful and encouraging, that supports our children to be their best selves. And we just wanted to share a few tools with you today. And Kelly, I appreciate you saying there is no such thing as perfection. And when we go from our heart, chances are we're going to make a connected effort with our children. When we go from fears, we're going to stop, we're going to control, and we're going to possibly get in the way of the relationship building that we have with our children. And in final words, and of encouraging parents, how would they incorporate different value systems they have internationally around the world? How could they just do one thing each day to bond with their children and to learn more about what they're doing in their day-to-day life?
Just having connection moments. When I talked about routines, for example, a morning routine for everyone to get out the door, get to where they're going to go, add little connection moments in those routines. Have meals together whenever possible with with your family. Also, special time. I scheduled special time with each child once a week. And that meant that we just went and did something together that was fun. And we didn't talk about misbehavior at all. We just got to know each other. I asked what and how questions. And that was built into every week. So my children did that from a young age. They just thought that was normal. So they still continued that when they were teenagers. And again, when they were teenagers, it was really hard not to bring up the misbehaviors of not doing homework or their grades or any misbehavior, any chore challenges we were having. But I did it. Whenever we were at special time, I made sure I didn't bring those things up. Because often when parents and children are interacting, the parents are just, it feels like they're on top of the children. I'm using that as a metaphor to making sure the children are doing what they're supposed to be doing and completing the homework they're supposed to be completing and blah, 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 the chores. Just time built into each week, hopefully a little bit in each day, just to get to know your child when they come home from school or you see them or during meals. What was the best part of your day? What was something that was scary for you today? What was something you had to use courage for today? Making that the way that your family talks to each other, because many of us weren't raised with those types of questions. So we have to build new habits as parents about how we interact with children and sharing our moments with that. So if we share, often that will give our children the courage to share. If we share about the mistakes that we've made that are the mistakes that are appropriate for children to hear about, then that will offer them more courage to share about their mistakes. So I would say modeling, asking those questions, and building in some routines that have connection as a part of the routine. So, for example, a young toddler, or not young toddler, so a preschooler is supposed to get dressed and then get their backpack, and then it's time for breakfast. What about they get dressed, they come get a hug from a parent, and then they get their backpack, they come get a high five from their parent or whatever. Just knowing that connection is one of the things that we all crave as humans, and that children, I think in general, in this rushed, hurried world, they don't get enough of that. So how can we add more connection in there? Because the relationship is the foundation for solving problems together, focusing on solutions, and trying to get into your child's world. That trust is really helpful, that your child gets it, that you care about their perspective, that you care about them, and you care about them even when they're imperfect, even when they're making mistakes.
I love you no matter what. Thank you, Kelly. This has been a rewarding conversation for me, and I'm sure it will be the same for any caregivers out there. Next time, we're going to get into how to prepare children for school. Thank you for joining us today, and please follow our websites if you like it, and see you next time. I'm Yogi Patel. Have a great day. If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to follow. And also, if you want more information, visit the website yogipateltte.com.